We go to 5.0, consent calendar. 5.1, approval of the agenda, a regular board meeting on May 28th.
Move.
We have a motion on the floor
Second.
and a second. We have a motion on the floor by Ms. Lopez, second by Mr. Macareno. Is that correct?
Yes.
Board members, any questions on that? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, that carries 5-0. Are you keeping up with me, Mrs. Rosemary? Thank you. We go to 5.2, approval of release warrant dated May 20, 2024. Correction, May 30th. Thank you, Ms. Lopez. May 30th, 2024, in the amount of $390,623.57.
Move.
Have a motion on the floor. Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion on the floor by Ms. Lopez, second by Ms. Gomez. Is that correct?
Yes.
Board members, you have any questions on this item? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Carries 5-0. Audience, if I'm going too fast over there, raise your hand. You can slow me down because I'll just take off. All right, thank you. We go ahead and go to the next section, is 6.0, public comments. Members of the public may address the board on any agenda item or other item of interest within the subject matter jurisdiction of the board before and during the governing board consideration of the item. The board is not able to discuss or take action on any item not appearing on the agenda. Pursuant to board policy, the board may limit individual comments to no more than 3 minutes and individual topic to 20 minutes. Please begin your comments by stating your name. Mr. Superintendent, we have any
Yeah, the board asks that during public comment, everyone be respectful of the speakers. Members of the public shall not interrupt or interject while another person is giving their public comment at the podium. During public comment, there shall be no use of foul language. Should a member of the public have a concern about a specific employee, we ask that you direct those concerns to the superintendent after this meeting so that the concerns can be handled through the proper procedures. Please do not use employee or student names during public comment. We have a few cards.
Go ahead, sir.
First card is Lisa Praham.
Good evening. I'm Lisa Preheim, and I teach at the high school. The upcoming school year will be my 34th in education and my 29th with Farmersville. I'm speaking tonight on agenda items 13.7 through 13.9 regarding contract addendums for district management and 21.3 regarding the superintendent's evaluation. I find it appalling that after claiming for the majority of the school year that the district could not afford more than a 2% raise for teachers, district management is now calling us too for the 5% raise we had to fight for. They've claimed all year that teachers could not be paid at a competitive rate because Farmersville Unified just doesn't have the money. I assume that wasn't an issue when they negotiated their own salaries, nor now. We, the teachers, are at the bottom of surrounding and similar district salary comparisons and have dropped further by accepting 5% this year. The superintendent likes to say that we got a great increase and that teachers are very happy with the result. This result that came after we all endured an unnecessary ordeal because district representatives weren't willing to negotiate in good faith. We are not happy with the result. We accepted 5% because we believe the district does not have the money to comfortably pay a fair amount. We believe the money has already been spent on increasing administrative salaries, reclassifying district personnel so they receive more pay without calling it a raise, and hiring additional helpers in the DO. District management is currently paid at a level well above average for surrounding and similar districts. They've tried to run this through in the summer when they think no one is paying attention. We've learned that we have to pay attention. As a teacher who spent my career with Farmersville Unified, who has taught 2 generations, of Farmersville students, and who has developed a strong bond with my students and graduates, I find it so frustrating and disheartening that now 2 superintendents have waltzed into the district, negotiated very nice salaries for themselves, only to head back to LA after a couple of years with a great retirement out of Farmersville. I, on the other hand, will have a salary factor in my retirement that is very low compared to my peers in other districts. This will drastically affect my income for the rest of my life, all because I chose to stay in Farmersville. All because I love and haven't wanted to leave, our students. It's clear where district priorities lie. Our teacher turnover is high. Just this year, we've lost several very good teachers, some newer with great potential, which was recognized by other districts who pay more, and even including your Teacher of the Year from last year. We're not going to make meaningful change unless we invest in and retain strong teachers with a commitment and connection to Farmersville. Meaningful change will not result from throwing more and more money at district administrators. I know you've been listening and have taken hard steps to make things better, both in human resources and most recently in the business department. I do think HR needs to be revisited. It seems that there's some shady stuff happening there. But because of your actions, we now have an opportunity to rebuild and make real improvement, which will be difficult to achieve with the current superintendent. I listened carefully to his speeches when he arrived, and I worked with him on the LCAP committee. He presents well, and I usually agree with what he has to say. My problem is with action, as Mrs. Sickle referenced at the June 6th meeting. I think managing the operations of a district may not be our superintendent's strength. If, because of financial constraints, he remains in the position for the duration of his contract, perhaps some of his management duties might be redistributed amongst the great number of assistants the district has hired. At the very least, we need to keep a close eye on what's happening at the district office. Thank you.
Thank you.
Crystal Rodriguez.
So good evening. This time I wrote it down. Good evening, members of the board. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. I am here on behalf of my fellow CSEA members to address some serious concerns regarding the performance and conduct of our superintendent. These issues are impacting our district and, more importantly, our staff and students. First, I would like to highlight the numerous promises made by the superintendent that have not been fulfilled. Specifically, commitments to improve our facilities, enhance educational programs, and support staff development have not been materialized. This has led to a widespread disappointment and mistrust among the staff and community. It has become evident that the superintendent has failed for our classified staff. Despite his amazing speech at the beginning of when he first started, he sold us a beautiful dream of how we are the foundation, how without us it's not possible, how our roles are crucial in the daily operations of our schools. Our concerns and needs have been constantly overlooked. This neglect has resulted in low morale and decreased job satisfaction among these essential employees. One of the most troubling issues is the superintendent's lack of availability and communication for his classified staff. Scheduled meetings are frequently canceled at his convenience, and attempts to reach him are often met with silence. The lack of his communication hinders effective collaboration and problem solving within the district. However, if you're an administrator or have a position at the DO, he's right there. Whenever you need him, covering for you, defending you, no matter no matter what, classified staff has always, sorry, I lost my spot, okay. No matter what, classified staff has to always say, his words would always be, why would they lie? Those words speak volumes to us as classified, that even if they lie to his face and we are screaming the truth, it doesn't matter what we say because we are just the bottom of the food chain, doing the work to keep his paycheck coming. Now let's talk about the unethical hiring process he allows and has allowed. Furthermore, there have been instances of positions being created and filled without proper public notification or a transparent hiring process. People in positions without proper education, stipends being made up to help give those hired a pay increase. Let's remember that during negotiations, he proposed waiving his raise this year to save jobs, demonstrating his commitment to the district. Yet tonight's board packet shows a pending approval for a 5% raise? How can he justify a raise when he already makes over $200,000? That 5% increase could cover multiple paychecks. It's troubling that despite concerns about our district's financial constraints, he is still willing to accept a raise? Interesting. But we don't have the money for teachers and aides. Let's take a minute to make that make sense. Most notably, the hiring of an assistant superintendent without any consideration for budget constraints or a reduction in the superintendent's own salary, which was initially justified as covering the responsibility for 2 roles. Because just remember, we took the assistant away a long time ago when Mr. Saviano was here. It raises serious ethical and financial concerns. I don't think you need a master's to figure that out. Then again, I'm just a classified employee still going to school, so what do I know? Recently, teacher positions and student intervention programs have been terminated due to the alleged lack of funds. However, these cuts were made while the superintendent did not reduce his salary when adding an assistant superintendent. Now let me ask you, considering our students' low scores, how many intervention teachers, aides, and other vacancies could be funded by the 5% raises requested by our superintendent, his assistant, and the CBO tonight? This decision tonight can further harm our students' educational opportunities and our teachers, their job security. Yet, our superintendent says he's here for the students. It is disheartening to see that despite his roots from the barrio and growing up like most in our community did or are growing up, the superintendent seems to have lost touch with the values and challenges that define us. His actions suggest a disconnect from the community he once made a beautiful promise to, prioritizing personal gain over the welfare of the district. Yes, that just proves that money will always change people no matter what barrio you come from. These issues collectively paint a troubling picture of the superintendent's leadership. I urge the board to take these concerns seriously and consider appropriate actions to address them. Our district deserves a leader who is not only competent, but also committed to transparency, accountability, and truly committed to the well-being of all stakeholders, especially the students. Thank you for your attention.
Rebecca Sickles.
Okay, FTA liked me so much, they asked me to speak again. Hi, I'm Rebecca Sickles, and I teach 6th grade at Freedom Elementary. I was originally going to speak on 13, 7, 8, and 9, and also 15, 1. So I am very glad to hear that that was tabled, that you guys are going to take a look at that and really get into that. Just a couple of things. Letter B in the addendum states that the agreement provides that during the term of the agreement, each position shall receive the same salary adjustment as that received by other certificated management personnel. This is something that's new. It sounds an awful lot like a Me Too clause, which, if it's something that important, shouldn't it be written into the contract and not just be an addendum? And just to be clear, FTA isn't really in favor of that because it sounds like an unsound negotiating technique. If you can imagine the administration getting whatever the teachers get, then they can come in with some crazy number like 10% or 20% and offer it to the teachers, and we all get to have a raise at the cost of the district. And that would not be a healthy financial practice for the district. I wish that our negotiations went more smoothly, but it's not that I want them to come in with the same numbers that I get. At first I thought, hey, that sounds really good, but then somebody was talking to me about it, about how that could very easily be abused. So we're not really in favor of that. Sometimes we don't agree on how to do things, but I think we all care about our district and want to keep our district healthy and afloat and do the best we can with it. So another thing is also during negotiations, when our district leadership was asked if they had a Me Too clause, they said no, okay, in front of the state person and the negotiations team. So if that is being brought up as any kind of past practice, they said they didn't have one. So just something to be considered. I have to admit, I go a little smoother than this most of the time, but I wanted to cut it down because a lot of what I had written was addressed by a previous person. So I'm kind of editing on the fly here. Yeah, please just make sure to proofread. Some people in FTA were seeing that it was done a bit in a rush, so I'm glad you have more time to reread some of the contract language and everything. Some of the names were incorrect, and just really getting into that. Considering the fact that it took 8 months of intense negotiation, hours of meetings, and nearly going on strike to get the 5% raise, I would suggest that the district leadership lead by example. They insisted all year on a 2% raise, that anything else was too much for the district, and yet here they are getting as much as they can get. We had to nearly strike for that 5%. I would suggest that they lead by example and take the 2% for themselves that they insisted for us. And I would once again just humbly ask that you keep reviewing that contract language, make sure it's nice and solid, because a Me Too clause would not be good for our district. I have just another slight thing I've wanted to do for a while, and I'm going to go ahead and do it tonight if I can remember where I put these. So I'm just going to talk loud while I walk. I don't know if any of you have ever been on a jury, but I did that dreaded jury duty once, and I ended up on a jury one time. I've done jury duty more than once, but I ended up on a jury once.
Thank you.
And it was a terrible experience because they put us in this room and they told us to evaluate not only if the person was guilty, but exactly what legal thing they were guilty of. And then no one told us what those were. So we had all these legal terms thrown at us, and we had no idea what exactly the definitions of those were. And if I could go back and change that experience, I would stand up and insist that they define that for me, that they gave me that information and answered those questions that I had. And I regret not doing that. And I can only imagine, as the leadership of our district and representing our community, how difficult a job that must be. And to only get information from 1 or 2 sources must be frustrating and feel incomplete. And so I have given you my contact information if you ever want to call. If I don't answer right away, it's because I have this thing where I just don't feel my butt buzzing. Everybody else seems to catch it, but I don't. So sometimes it goes to voicemail, but I will get back to you. It'll be a disability someday, I'm sure. Someone will get fired because they didn't catch that call or that text, and it'll be, defined later. But just feel free to reach out and ask anything. And if I don't know, I'll tell you I don't know. And if I know, I'll give you as honest an answer as I can, and you'll have any information that you might need. So I just wanted to offer that to you. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Crystal Villalobos.
evening, board members, parents, staff, students. My name is Crystal Villalobos, and I have been the counselor at Freedom Elementary since 2015. This evening, I want to highlight the invaluable role that our counselors play in propelling our students towards success. However, as we embark on this district-wide journey to further elevate our students' achievement, it's crucial to acknowledge that some recent district-level decisions might inadvertently create obstacles for our students. Here at Farmsville Unified, we've seen firsthand the positive impact of counselor consistency. Students who can rely on a familiar face are more likely to open up, to seek help, and develop the coping mechanisms that they need to thrive. Research shows that consistent relationships with supportive adults is the single most important factor that leads to positive outcomes for kids, especially for those battling mental illness issues. Unfortunately, the high turnover rate in teachers and staff and leadership can make it challenging for our kids to build those consistent connections. Here at Freedom Elementary, for example, we'll be welcoming our 5th principal in just 9 years. Recently, the district announced counselor reassignments, something that has never been practiced in our district. And while we understand the district's need for flexibility, counselor consistency is vital for our at-risk students. These students who are already grappling with emotional and social challenges depend on the trusting relationships that they've built with their counselors. Reassignments disrupt this vital support system and can set back a student's progress. Did the district consider how this decision would impact our students? Instead of reassignments, can we explore opportunities for increased collaboration amongst the school sites? Counselors from different schools can co-lead workshops, training sessions, participate in joint student support groups. This way, counselors can share their expertise and best practices while minimizing the disruption for students who rely on their established relationships. However, these positive and collaborative practices are hindered by new policies. For example, counselors are now required to get district approval before visiting another site for the purposes of collaboration. Our ultimate goal is for the students in the district to have the access to the support that they so desperately need. Counselors are a critical part of that equation. Members of the counseling team are eager to work with the district administration in a collaborative manner to do what's best for our students. However, moving counselors without any notice, even worse, without the ability to prepare our kids, our high-risk students, for the change is just unacceptable. Some might even say unethical. If the administration is unwilling to collaborate and do what is best for our students, we will move forward with grievances and unfair labor practice charges. We urge the board to consider alternative solutions. By working together, we can create a system that empowers all of our students. Thank you.
Juan Tejandan.
Good afternoon. Juan Tejandan, I've been working at Farmersville High School since 2005, and I never had to be up here, ever. But they pretty much brought up the same thing about the race, our concern that we have, especially when we had to fight to get a raise for all the rest of the employees. We're lacking help. A lot of the positions have not been filled. We're pulling people away from their regular routes to cover other people's routes. But yet they said there's no money. They keep bringing up the budget. But then I see on the agenda that they want to get a 5% raise, where it will really, I think, damage this district. All I ask is the board to please consider not maybe giving these raises. Just look it over, and perhaps walk the sites. I'm asking the board. I used to see you guys all the time. I only see a few coming to our sites where our classrooms they're just looking really bad. We get teachers that are trying to help, but really, we shouldn't be lacking on help. Take a look at that. That's it. Like I said, since 2005, I never had to step right here, but you guys need to listen. We're losing all these teachers and staff that are really good for our district, that have been staying here for a while, thinking we're gonna get a change, and it just get worse. Like I said, board members, come to our sites and see where we need the help. Teachers are lacking material and we're lacking equipment. Really, we need to step it up with all due respect. Thank you.
Connie Flores.
Hi, my name is Connie Flores, and I've been at Hester School for going on 19 years. And I just want you guys to know that this is the first time I've ever been up here speaking in a board meeting, because I've never had to. And for those of you who know me in the community, I've serviced most of teachers, principals, board members, grandchildren. I've always serviced them, and when they leave, they're ready to go, whether it's to TK or kindergarten. I managed the program, I did my own enrollment, and I never had complaints or any issues. So I'm asking the board if you would, take this under consideration. And I do want to start with my first concern. And as of September of 2022, I was on workman's comp, and I was able to return back to my school site, and that was from October. And I was actually out from October all the way till the last day of school in June. However, on November the 30th of 2022, there was an incident that had occurred in my room. And we all know we're all mandated reporters, so I did what I was supposed to do. And I reported an incident that had to deal with admin. And when that took place, we were headed for winter break, which was December, and I believe we returned back on January the 11th. However, on January the 10th, I received a phone call from HR telling me that I'm not to return. And I'm like, wait a minute, why? Tomorrow's work. And they're like, well, because you have to have full clearance from your workman's comp doctor. So I said, okay, whose call was that? And she goes, well, that was up to the site principal. So I said, okay, but nothing has changed. Well, it's a decision that has already been made. So once you get cleared, you can return. Okay, so I ended up staying out all the way, like I said, till the last day of school in June. And my concern with that was nothing had changed up until the time that I did what I was supposed to do. I followed protocol, mandated reporter, and I don't want to go into too much detail, but I know the Farmersville Police Department stated they were going to view what was on the camera. When they did that, they were going to critique it, and you're talking the chief, the sergeant, and the lieutenant. If they felt the urgency that it moved towards the district attorney's office, then that's where it was going to go. Well, to my surprise, that's where it ended up. Now, during that time, I understood that anytime you are under investigation, you're on admin leave, while these two administrators were able to work here at the district. Now, I kind of look at that, and then I look at my situation. I would have loved to answer phones here and return to work, because the only modification that my doctor had for me was sit on a chair. Teachers have that option anyways. We could sit on a chair or we could sit on the floor. I deal with preschool, so usually it's up and down. And I felt that very interesting that I wasn't able to return, but yet something ended up at the district attorney's office and they were able to work here. And I also understood that when you're on admin leave, you're not supposed to communicate with any staff. So how could that possibly be when you're here working? Another one of my concerns was when we hired when the district hired our UPK, myself and my aide, we had a meeting with Dr. Chavez on, I believe, October. And we understood that that was our our boss. Well, she was out on medical leave, I want to say January the 29th, and she returned back on May the 13th. So during that time, it was very confusing because I went to my principal and I did ask, I need some paper. Well, let me find out who I go to because, your boss is not here. So I counted the days from the time I thought who was my boss at the time. She was gone. It was 72 days minus Easter. So that left 66 days. And during those 66 days that I would say my site principal was in charge, I was called in her office and I had a conference memo, and I never knew what that was. I never knew what a restorative meeting was because I never had to attend. And during the conference memo, there was 4 concerns, and they were very vital to me. We have the option to sign. I didn't sign it. However, shortly after that, she called me in here. We had a meeting scheduled with Dr. Chavez, and I had already reached out to him prior. Well, when we came here, I thought it was to discuss the old one. Well, I'm getting hit and I'm being reprimanded, and I'm like, wait a minute, I'm confused. We haven't even settled this, and I'm already getting hit with this. So I counted 62 days, and I'm getting a conference memo with 4 concerns, and then now I'm getting reprimanded. Now, I've always taken accountability for my actions. On one of them, yes, I took full accountability. It was a short notice, and I apologize, and I did say, I could assure you it's not gonna happen again. And Dr. Chavez, during that time, he did say, well, the reason why I canceled with you was because I assumed that it was gonna be about this. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, thank you. I thought you were traveling back home because it was a Friday. And mind you, I reached out, and every time I reached out, it got canceled on. So my whole thing is, when he first came, he came to us, I feel, with broken promises and a vision that only he was able to see. And now I'm where I'm at, and I said, so what's gonna happen next year? I said, I'm gonna be getting more of these and coming back with my last check. I go, that's not okay with me because you hear something, and it's like everything I read was all false accusations. And I'm here tonight to say that as a superintendent, I feel he has let me down. And not only me, but I'm sure a lot of us, aside of our community. But what's most important is our students. I invited him in November before Thanksgiving break. I asked him if he can come and look at the class, look at how things are going. And he said, well, yes, I will. He goes, but when we get back from break, he goes, send me a personal email and remind me. I did, and I'm still waiting. While school's out, never got to see him in my class. And I just feel like, where's the equality? You said that classified and certificated you were here, you were gonna unify us, and we were gonna be treated equally. That's not true. You lied, I feel. Then, it's like admin reaches out, and in 3 days, we're on calendar to meet. So how does that make me feel as classified? I thought that we were all gonna be treated equally. Well, I don't know if that was a vision he came in and intended, because, I just always been pushed to the side. So I said, okay, school's almost out. He was gonna reschedule again. I told him it's okay. I sent him an email. I said, Dr. Chavez, thanks for your time, and thank you for always rescheduling and counseling on me. Thank you, Ms. Flores. Did I want him to come through my room? Yeah, I did. I wanted him to see, instead of hearing what was being said about me in 66 days. Who does that? And I just feel like, is it a form of retaliation in a professional manner? I can't answer that. That could be something you guys could think about, but what am I gonna do next year if I'm still on that site? and that is my site principal. Am I gonna keep dealing with things such as this? Because, I mean, my reputation has always spoke for itself. The kids that come out of the program they're ready to go. I have a 3-year-old who's gonna be 4 in August. She can write her first and last name. So we're in our class and we are working. And I just feel like, leadership, I feel that you have failed us. And HR, I just feel like, I did some research, and even HR, I mean, they're getting paid good, and what education does she actually have? I looked at the requirements, I looked at the qualifications. You need a bachelor's, but most districts prefer a master's. Does our HR have that? If they did, I don't think there would be a lot of mistakes. You need to be pretty knowledgeable with retirement. I know some teachers that retired this year, and there was a miscalculation with the amount of time. And it's not just something you look over, because that affects their future. They work hard all these years, and then to turn around and get miscalculated, and if they wouldn't have caught it, that's how it would have stayed. But us as employee, that's not our career. We're not in HR. So can our district not look into offering positions to those that are qualified? It's like a teacher. If you come in with a credential or you're almost done, they give us a waiver. Well, good. If we don't meet the waiver, if we don't do all what's asked of us, then sorry, you gotta go. So where's the accountability for HR? There's still time for her to go to school. There's time. I mean, bachelor's, it doesn't take very long to get, but I just don't see the equality. How can somebody just be placed somewhere without the qualifications? Is it fair? And most importantly is our kids. Our kids are being failed, and it's so sad because they are our future, and we work hard at what we do. And to know that all the money is being put here, it's a shame. And I just ask the district to really consider and ask yourself, what is good for your grandkids? Do you want leadership like what's here now? I know I don't. And like I said, you know, promises were broken, and I mean, the vision, I don't know if he's the only one that's seen it. And the school site that I'm at, it has really, really declined. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Garfield High, but our Hester Elementary is an elementary school of Garfield. Incidents happen, students are getting stabbed by other students, scissors are being thrown across the room, chairs are being thrown, kids are getting hit in the head, and students are spitting in other people's food. How much of that goes home to the parents? Do calls get made? No. A lot of these incidents are happening, and it's happening because the kids are going home and they're telling their parents what is happening on site. We send our kids to school thinking they're in a safe spot. Are they really? And being inside and seeing what's happening in our district, it's a shame. And you ask yourself, are our kids, our grandkids really safe at school? Not with the leadership that we have. And I just ask the district to please take this under consideration. I'm going on 19 years, first time, didn't know what restorative, didn't know what conference memo, and now I'm reprimanded, and I don't agree with that. And I just hope that you guys all take this under consideration, and I'm sure that the program that I have run all these years speaks for itself. So please take that into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bree Zamora.
Good evening, members of the school board, staff, and community members. My name is Bree Zamora, and I'm here to speak on behalf of many in our community who deeply believe in the importance of retaining our current superintendent, Dr. Chavez. To Mr. Vasquez and to Ms. Lopez, you both have served on the board during the most controversial time periods of the school district. From 2004 to present, Farmersville Unified School District has seen multiple recalls, and it's been a revolving door of superintendents. It's time the board recognizes and supports the superintendent instead of pulling the plug on his efforts when the going gets tough. In the last year, Dr. Chavez has helped eradicate multiple incompetent administrators with the support of the board. And now it's time to start addressing the teachers. Farmersville Unified School District created a culture of disengagement and complacency among most teachers. We have teachers who demand more money without the expectation of having to provide students with a proper education. Data provided to the community during the Parent Academic Forum supports these statements, showing only 20 and 10% of students are meeting the standards for ELA and math. It is no surprise then that the teachers union, along with teachers, would go to great lengths to see Dr. Chavez removed as superintendent. The progress we have seen under Dr. Chavez's leadership is significant, but there is still much work to be done. To achieve lasting change and continue on this positive trajectory of accountability, it is imperative that the board fully supports his efforts. I would ask you extend his term an additional 2 years. I urge the board to stand firmly behind Dr. Chavez and his mission of accountability. His vision and dedication are exactly what our district needs to ensure that every student receives a top quality education. By supporting his efforts, we are investing in the future success of our students and our community, not the teacher's investment.
Those are all the comments.
Thank you. We go to 8.1, superintendent comments.
I just wanted to report that summer school, the kickoff went extremely smooth for both the regular and the after-school program at the junior high and here at Freedom. So we have plenty of students. We have students on the waiting list, and I've heard really good reports from both administrators that are at the sites. Moving forward to 24-25, our focus needs to be on instruction. It is true, and I commend our teachers for their true commitment to our students and making our students our priority. So we will continue to work on that call to action and make our students our priority by improving instruction, by improving our collaboration among teachers, by making the shift from a focus on teaching to a focus on learning, from a focus of adults to the focus on kids, and making sure that that takes place across the board at all sites in all classrooms. That is the imperative piece. So I hope that we can work together in making that happen, because we cannot afford to fail our kids. So thank you, that's all my comments.
Thank you, Superintendent. At this time, we move over to 10.0, high school issues, 11 point, correction, 11.0, high school issues. 11.1, approval of Farmersville High School Key Club end of the year trip, June 14th to Pismo Beach.
Second.
We have a motion on the floor and a second. Motion by Mr. Alvarez, second by Ms. Lopez. Is that correct?
Yes.
That being said, board members have any questions? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, that carries 5-0. 12.0 curriculum. 12.1 public hearing 2024-20 to 2025 local accountability plan open at 7:33. Go ahead, sir. Mr. Ochoa, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much. Good evening, school board members, Dr. Chavez. My name is Eduardo Ochoa, I'm the State Federal Programs Coordinator, and I have an overview of the 24-25 LCAP that I'm going to present to you tonight. This overview includes changes from the 3-year LCAP that expires at the end of this month. So let's start with the purpose of the LCAP. There are 3 overarching themes and requirements as part of the LCAP, and that's setting goals, So what is it that we want to accomplish with the LCAP funding and the actions set forth within it? What are those actions specifically? Who are we targeting for improvements? How are we going to make that improvement? And then leveraging the resources within that LCAP to target those specific student groups. So again, who's the benefit? Who benefits from the LCAP? And it's the students. But more specifically, it's the unduplicated pupil count. So if you're unfamiliar with unduplicated pupils, this is a broad category that includes 3 major student groups. That's socioeconomically disadvantaged students, English learners, and foster youth. So the LCAP's purpose is to principally direct the services and the actions within that LCAP to at least one of those groups for every single action within that LCAP. At that point, once you principally direct those actions towards at least one of those groups, you can open those services to additional groups. So we can serve all students in some capacity through the LCAP. So another requirement of the LCAP is that we need to improve or increase services. In other words, that's to make the services better, improve the quality, or increase the amount of services we're providing to students versus replacing any type of service that might already be in place or as required by federal and state law. Other factors to consider in the LCAP development, 4 major themes here, especially the first one, and the most important one is to look at the impact on student outcomes. So what is it that we're doing within the LCAP, those actions therein, and how is it affecting students in a positive manner? So some of the ways that we measure that growth is through the California School Dashboard, and that's the indicators that are on there, which I'll show you in just a bit, as well as any other local metrics. We also get input from educational partners, and those include teachers, other staff members, parents, students, management, community members, and local bargaining units. We also consider the long-term planning or the sustainability of those actions. So once an action is in place, can it be carried over through the life of the LCAP, the 3-year period? And lastly, the consideration of other funding resources. So there are grant funds and federal funds that can often support actions that address similar needs. And so we want to make sure that we're maximizing the use of all of the funds. So some actions may not fall into the LCAP because they can be supported through other funding sources. I do want to take this time to comment that the minimum proportionality percentage, that's to say the amount of dollars going towards actions funded by the LCAP have decreased to a projected $10.6 million in the 2024-25 school year. Although we do have a projected $2.4 million in LCAP carryover that must be spent in 24-25, the first year of the LCAP, those dollars will not be present in years 2 and year 3 of the new LCAP. So the LCAP carryover is funding that was saved from not moving forward with multiple actions on last year's or this current year's LCAP, but it has to be spent this coming year. And I'll highlight what some of those actions were as I progress through the goals. The next thing I want to show here is a screen capture of our 2023 California School Dashboard, which includes the all student groups in multiple metric areas. Specifically, within each of these metrics, we have additional student groups. So it's not, we don't measure progress by all students all the time. We also have to dive deeper and look at English learners, socioeconomically disadvantaged students, students with disabilities, foster youth, homeless youth, and there's a new metric that we need to consider this year, and that's our progress of our long-term English learners. That's students who are not making progress over a 3-year period of time and who have been in a California school for over 7 years or more. So as you can see here within the metrics, this is our current data. This is our current reality. The biggest needs are in English and mathematics, where we're in red, meaning that we're at the very low status. We have English learner progress at orange, suspension rate at orange, and our college career indicator is low. This coming year, it will have a color associated with it, but because of the disruption in the data over the last several years, it is not available to us at this time, nor for any other district, but it's coming. It would be the equivalent to bot in orange right now as well. So those are the bottom 2 ranges for metric areas. So it does share here that there's a great need within our community, within our student populations, not just the all students, but when we dig down deeper, specific student groups as well. There's also educational partner input that is taken and used for the development of the LCAP. One of the first waves of getting information is through the LCAP survey, and these are available for and collected from parents, students, staff members, and community members from February through May. We also had LCAP forums that were held at each of the school sites preceding each of the open house events this spring. And we had an LCAP committee that was developed through a combination of staff members, parents, students, union representatives, community members, and administrators. And lastly, our DLAC provides input and reviews the goals and actions within the LCAP. So there's a lot of input that is received, a lot of interactions, and we want to know what are the priorities of the aggregate aggregate groups, the input that was received. And there was a theme that it was clear that continuing with existing positions was prioritized for as much as the LCAP could support, in addition to improving systems and processes associated with those roles, those positions, and resources. So it's about going back to the improving the services. So it's not that most of the resources need to be revamped if we can continue to support them. Or I should say, not that they need to be eliminated if possible. For a funding perspective, some of that was necessary, which I'll get into here now. Oops. So our goal 1 out of 3 goals associated with the LCFF is to increase student achievement for all students and student groups in core content areas. So there are 3 things that I want to point out here on this slide. One, there's one list, although it takes up 2 different columns. There's one list of all the actions that were associated in last year's LCAP. Those without a strike-through or a color associated with it means that that action continues into the current LCAP. If it has a green highlight to it, means that there was an addition or expansion of that service. And then a red font with a cross-through means that that action, although it was in the previous current three-year LCAP, it is now not going to continue into the new 3-year LCAP. So you see here that the main things that are dropping off are the after-school program. Although there weren't any expenses associated with the after-school program, the action itself is coming off. There's plenty of funding through the ELOP, assets, and ACES funding to support that program. There was also an unfilled position of a coordinator of college and career readiness, and so that position will not continue into the LCAP either. There's also the standards-based supplemental instructional materials through alternative funding sources, including Title I and lottery funds. We're confident that the majority of standards-based instructional materials will be supported. The green highlight is the one I want to spend a little bit of time on. So previously, the current LCAP shows that we have a TK through 3rd class size reduction. So this is an expansion. So the TK through 12th means that we are dedicating a good portion of the funds within the LCAP, approximately $3.7 million, towards sustaining those positions that help reduce those class size averages from about an average of 30 to, depending on the class size average at the grade level, anywhere from about 24, 27, if not lower. So there is some investment within that. Now, overall, in Goal 1, these proposed actions add up to a cumulative $7.3 million. In Goal 2, which is to provide comprehensive academic and social-emotional support systems to ensure students are provided with equitable opportunities to reach their full potential. We see a similar list. I don't have to explain the colors on this one, other than to identify that there is one new action on the right, which is the EL Coordinator LTEL support. The new LCAP requires that we have a specific action that supports long-term English learners. So the portion of the EL coordinator's time is going to be devoted to helping our staff with instructional strategies and supports for specifically our long-term English learners. And we find that historically the 2 areas that are of greatest need are the reading and writing components of those language domains. The two actions that you see crossed off are the school home transportation to the tune of 200,000, which were earmarked for an additional school bus that will not continue. And then unfortunately, the intervention teachers have also dropped off. However, and I want to say this with emphasis, the need for intervention has not gone away, but we realize that with that, we need to invest in that first instruction, that initial reading instruction. Once we get that solidified, we can build on that with that Tier 2 intervention and continue to see those actions fold back into the LCAP. But with the funding constraints, that is something that was required at this time. But I think with some additional planning systems and processes updates, as well as things breaking our way with funding, we will look at that as that continues to be a priority in our district with student reading levels. Now, goal 3 is to increase the level of engagement by parents, family, and community partners. Oh, actually, before I do that, let me go back here. The proposed actions for this goal are just shy of $4.9 million. So I'll go to goal 3, which is to increase the level of engagement by parents, family, and community partners in the education of their children. The vast majority of the actions themselves remain, although most of them, or some of them, are not in the LCAP. And to elaborate on that, the first two items that you see crossed out, which are the parent technology literacy workshops and the adult education ESL literacy classes, those can and should continue, will continue through the adult education. So we have CAPE and WIOA funding that will support adult classes. So instead of funding them through the LCAP, we can do that through alternative funding sources. We cannot identify additional funding sources for marquees at each school, so that action will drop off in the coming year. And the proposed actions in this set of actions for goal 3 is $831,000. Now, I want to point out that the vast majority of the LCAP funding is going towards sustaining personnel costs. A total of approximately 105 existing positions, in whole or in part, will be supported by the LCAP in 24-25 school year, with 86% of the LCAP budget being earmarked for direct personnel costs. Now, there is something new that all districts need to be aware of, and some districts are receiving additional funding, but I want to make sure that I give this disclaimer that it is not through the LCFF funding, the local control funding formula. These are through alternative state funds, and they're specifically for schools that meet a non-stability and socioeconomically disadvantaged pupil threshold, meaning that there's a high turnover in the students going attending the school, as well as high rates of socioeconomically disadvantaged students, means that they're from families with low incomes. So many continuation schools in the state are receiving this additional set of monies that are not LCFF, they are state funds. The reason that we have to incorporate another goal if we do receive those funds into the LCAP is because it's a similar or same planning requirements. And so instead of having a separate plan, we are required to incorporate that goal and those actions into the LCAP. So that is it here. So the equity multiplier, it's a focus goal specifically for DCA, for Deep Creek Academy, to the tune of $73,683. And the funding is to be used to provide evidence-based services and supports for students at the school. The funds cannot be used for personnel costs, and they must supplement and not supplant existing services. And the funding is only for 1 year. So the primary focus of funding for schools that receive this is to build capacity of the staff. That includes systems, professional development, and things of that sort that will remain and continue on once the funding source is no longer present. So the school, Deep Creek Academy, is going to focus on 3 major areas. The first being professional development for effective teaching strategies in ELA and mathematics, as well as the PLC process and data analysis. The second is on college and career opportunities, and that's really for the enhanced aftercare for continuation school students. So once they finish at Deep Creek Academy, are they able to go and get into a college or get a career? Do they have that preparation? So that aftercare services will be an emphasis. And the third being the behavior and social emotional support. So it's building those supports and those systems of supports for the students in continuation school. So again, to summarize, goals 1s through 3 are using the LCFF funding that go towards supplemental concentration funding, supporting unduplicated pupil counts, while the goal 4 is a separate funding source specifically for Deep Creek Academy for qualifying for that additional funding. And the metric areas for the school were in college career indicator as well as the suspension indicators. So the funding will be to address those two main areas. Our next steps, we are still continuing to receive technical assistance from TCOE. That is ongoing. We hope to have their last set of feedback next week so we can solidify the draft that will be coming to the board for your review and approval at our next meeting on June 25th. And with accompanying that LCAP draft is the LCAP federal addendum, which outlines the general services using federal funds, including Titles 1 through 4. And then the local indicators, that's a self-assessment of multiple priority areas, including areas 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, and 7. So with that, does the board have any questions?
Mr. Alvarez?
Can you repeat that, please? Oh. No, we're good. We're good. I think you got it under control, so I'm gonna trust you with that. Good job.
Ms. Gomez?
So are we allowed to have input from our audience today with this hearing? After us? I have several questions, but so the LCAP, every site has meetings held, right, for LCAP? I don't know how many site administrators are here today, but I can tell you on my experience when it came to Freedom, those meetings were held during the morning on work days, so I was not able to attend. I'm very curious to know how many parents were in attendance of that and how many teachers during school. I attended the high school because my daughter went, so I was part of the LCAP, and there was not a lot of parent participation.
So I will address that by signaling that the district coordinated efforts for the LCAP input. So the meetings that were held at the school sites were probably the ones you're referring to are for school site council, and that'd be a separate set of meetings. The LCAP committee and the open forums were the ways for parents to provide that direct input.
Perfect. Okay, you're right. Yeah, ELAC and school site. Still for the schools administrators, I think those need to be held during times where parents and people are able to attend. Let's see what else do I.
And while you look for that question, that is something that came up through our input on the surveys, is that the flexible times, that was a theme through the input that we received both in person and through the surveys.
Yeah, and I even emailed people and never received responses back on, any of those questions I had. So you did really good at just explaining a lot of this stuff. I'm gonna go ahead and pass it on and hope that the audience is able to bring some questions, and maybe that'll trigger something that came through. But I appreciate the work that you put into that.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Macarena?
Well, I think it was a great synopsis of something that could be very complicated. So thank you very much for that. That was a great presentation. It gives me a little bit more insight as well as what the requirements of LCAP. No, I did a great job. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Ms. Lopez?
Yes, I also like the way you presented that. Very simple and not a lot of, words and acronyms or whatever they use. It's good for everybody. But I did have a couple of clarifying questions. On the coordinator, I think you said that part of that position, is it part or is it a whole position for the English language coordinator?
Yeah, so the EL coordinator position is going to be multi-funded in the coming year. The majority, about 90% of the funding, coming out of Title III. And so whenever you utilize Title III, the services can only go towards English learners. So the additional 10% would be covered by the LCAP. So that gives additional flexibility to do some of the required things with LTELs and ELD. but it would be 2 funding sources for that position.
So, okay, maybe I missed it. So is that a new position?
No, it's an existing position.
That's what I wanted to know. The other one was on the home transportation. You said we're not cutting home transportation, just that bus, correct?
Correct. The 200,000 that was earmarked in the current LCAP was to add a bus, right? So the additional bus will not be moving forward with that. We'll still have the existing transportation services, but we won't have funds earmarked for adding a new bus.
Okay. And in implementing class size reduction, have you looked at classrooms? Do we have enough classrooms to support that?
This really won't be to add additional classrooms. It's really to maintain as many classrooms as we can. So if we can already house students in these existing classrooms, we'll be able to continue doing so. So it's not to decrease current class size levels from where they are to something even smaller, because our class sizes are pretty good comparatively speaking to other surrounding districts. It'll be to maintain the class size reduction that we have.
Okay, so you're saying K-12, we have 30 and under in each class?
Yeah, depending on like some PE classes might be larger than that, but for the most part, our averages range from about 20 to 22 in most cases.
Okay, well, they can speak up later, but I just wanted to ask that question. Okay, thank you.
Excuse me, ma'am. Thank you. Mr. Ochoa, thank you for that presentation. It was really enlightening to put it in concrete to be more understandable. So at this time, by raise by hand, audience, do you have any questions? Please raise your hand. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
Mendoza, you had intervention crossed out and also the after-school program crossed out. What does that mean exactly?
Okay.
Crossing out the after-school program.
Okay.
I mean, I know a lot of kids go there. I mean, that's
Yeah. So great clarifying question. Yeah. So great clarifying question. I'll start with that one. So it's not to eliminate after-school program. It's eliminate any sort of contribution that the LCAP would have provided for the program. So the program is strong. It has a stable funding source through ACES, assets, and ELOPE funding. So it's got 3 sources of funding already. It doesn't need any contributions from the LCAP. So the after-school program will continue. So the LCAP is a district-wide plan that identifies how we're going to use these specific funds for those students that have been identified within it. Yeah. So I've mentioned this as part of the reduction of the MPP. So it's the minimum proportionality percentage, means that because our attendance and our enrollment has decreased, the funding source that provides funding towards the LCAP has also decreased. So if we are receiving less money now and in future years, that means that we won't be able to sustain those same actions. So reductions in services are necessary. At the same time, we also have increased costs in some cases. So there was mention of a raise already taking place, right? And so those costs and step and column, there's general raises and increases in costs also factor in when most of the LCAP is towards personnel costs at a rate of 86%. So we have to manage what can the LCAP sustain. If there are any adjustments that are needed or necessary at the time, we have to do that year after year. So the reading intervention teachers was one of those things because the funding is dropping, and due to the data showing that we're not getting as much out of it now, and I think it goes back to more of a first instruction issue. We need to get that down right before we can add an intervention piece. So it's not that the intervention piece is going to go away completely, or in future years, is that we need to get this part right before we can then add that piece, but the funding needs to be there in order to do that.
Okay, thank you. Sir, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm a little confused. I know there's been a lot of different information put out, but classroom sizes, can you clear up as to what do you mean by classroom sizes are below 20 or whatever number
And thank you for adding that, because that is the outlier. Freedom Elementary had the highest class sizes in the district, in the ranges of about 25, 27, in some cases, I think maybe even 29, right? But the other school sites had a much lower average, so when you combine them together, it came out to a rate of about 20 to 22 district-wide. K-12. So thank you for the point of clarification.
Behind, back over there raising your hand, go ahead. Can you please stand?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Remember that pays taxes here. I know that we passed a proposition not too long ago for taxes, because I get, get charged for it, but it was for the school district to minimize the classrooms, especially for, to second grade, if I'm not mistaken. So if you look at the numbers, we are much smaller compared to other schools, but again, it's because it was a tax incentive. But I understand that once the kids move on, that's a little bit, crowded, but it was just to target those kids that needed the extra help when they were a little bit smaller. How does that play into, are we contributing more, or it's just they're taking it to the higher grade to like third, fourth, and fifth?
So the class sizes are determined by the number of teachers per grade level and the enrollment of the students. So that can fluctuate a little bit year after year. So you may at times have bubbles, but we try to keep the averages stable as much as possible, with most of the smaller class sizes taking place in the primary grade levels, where that investment in additional time one-on-one in small groups would benefit the students. So I don't have the data in front of me to see what alternative funding sources were available at that time from the community. So it's hard to answer that question fully, and I apologize for that.
Go ahead, ma'am.
So my question about the class sizes was, I know that across the county that one way that they report class sizes is they take the number of students and the number of teachers employed and divide them. So if you have teachers that provide prep, you have teachers that are like academic coaches, but it doesn't actually reflect the actual number of students in an assigned classroom. Can you tell me which formula, which way you looked at, it was looked at here to provide those numbers?
I'm trying to remember which classes or which positions were excluded from that. With certainty, I cannot tell you right now, but that is something I can follow up with.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Go ahead.
On several fronts, that is like a multi-pronged type of approach. One, some of that has to be a local decision at the school site. What are the resources that are available at the school site to help out with that? There are multiple ways to do that in the form of either small group differentiation in the classroom, like small groups. An example of that is guided reading, right? So you have a schedule throughout the week to support student reading groups at their levels. There's also another one that's school-wide that can be used, and that's a school-wide deployment model. So we try to utilize all of our resources at the school site for a given portion of time to provide targeted, specific support to students with a common need. Neither of those is something that has been decided yet. I think that has to have input from staff and leadership at the school sites to be able to do that. But those are two examples of what can happen. Mm-hmm. it will be largely a school site decision as to do that. So again, utilizing the resources available at the school site. Mhm.
Is there any way when you guys, when we do like the outcast meetings or any of the meetings or we're saying do it after hours, and you just do a one meeting for any school sites? Because at the end of the day, you know, we have 4 different kids at 4 different sites, I mean, that's 4 different days a week that we're going to a meet.
Mm. Yeah, and that's why the multi-pronged pronged approach of the surveys. So if nobody could make a meeting, there's always the way to submit information and input through a survey. We also did it at a school base with the open forums, and that was the ability for parents and any educational partner group to be able to provide input at that school site after hours. And then the LCAP committee was that cross-section of our educational partners. So it included a combination of all of our educational partner groups to provide that input. And that was done, I believe, from 3:15 to 4:15 on a series of dates.
Ma'am, did you have a question here? Go ahead.
As mhm. Yeah, you'll see that. You'll see a reflection. You'll see a reflection of the LCAP does prioritize individuals who are providing direct services to students.
Excuse me, could you address the board, because I want to hear what you're saying.
Sorry, I didn't have a microphone.
Thanks.
So, my concern is we're gonna invest all this money on first instruction, high teacher turnover rate. Is there something in the LCAP that I may have missed that keeps that training, that experience, that knowledge here? So that in 3 to 4 years, is there a system in place? Maybe I missed it, I'm not sure if I missed it or not. I just don't wanna see good quality training for first instruction leaving again, like our teacher of the year is leaving this year after 10 years of training from Farmersville that we paid for, that families here paid for, and it's leaving. So there's something in our LCAP that whatever we train these next 2 to 3 years doesn't go away. I don't think that.
Okay. Let me answer that. I think I understand what you're saying, but let me rephrase that within my response. One is one of the biggest areas of feedback, the themes from our stakeholder groups, our educational partners, I should say, is that we need to improve the way we do things, right? So it's not about necessarily adding more things, but it's keeping what we have and improving the systems, improving the processes, improving how we do things. So I think this connects with what you're saying about a retention of staff. If we build a strong support system that puts training in place, continues to support that training, right? Not just with say a workshop or one training, but all the way through, from the teaching of that, the coaching of that, the feedback of that, the collaboration with it. I think that will help with what you're addressing. The part that I do need to clarify is the LCAP, going back to one of the main tenets of the LCAP, is to improve or increase services. So I want to be clear with what I may understand or how the audience may take the comment is we can't build in any sort of incentives within the LCAP, right? So whether it's a retention stipend or anything of that nature, they can't be for that. It has to be towards services directly to students. The educational partners agree with that the system, the way we do things needs to improve.
I'm gonna take a few more questions and we have to move on. Go ahead, ma'am. Can you please stand?
Okay.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, so thank you for that question because I didn't spell it out for everybody. It's the Local Control Accountability Plan. So it's a portion of our funds with a portion of the LCFF, which is the Local Control Funding Formula, which is generated through those 3 student groups that I mentioned earlier. They have a subset of our overall budget. Part of it is through the LCAP. And so that's what we're talking about today.
So thank you for that clarification, because it seems a lot of questions that are coming from the audience are questions regarding academics. And I'm pretty sure there was a forum, but a lot of people didn't come and address those concerns or questions. I was there. So I just wanted to clarify that this is about budget.
Okay, I'm gonna go with this lady over here who wanted to make, you raised your hand, yes. And then we'll go with the young lady at the far end.
I'll make this fast. Number one, I'm just gonna clarify. Media technology specialists are our.
Librarians. Yes.
Okay, because I've never heard of library tech called a media technology specialist. I have heard credential librarians called that. My second is really a comment, and it comes to teacher input. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Nora Alstead. I teach at Snowden and Hester. I'm the elementary music teacher. I also have a credential as a teacher librarian and K-12 computer science. That just gives you a little of my background. One of my principals sent out an email about, oh, if you want to be on the LCAP committee, I need somebody to do this. Sent the dates out. One of the dates I couldn't make because I was coaching esports and we had a game that day. I said I can make the rest. Oh, I found somebody else to do it. And we're only allowed to send one person. And then the very last week of school, talking to that person, oh, anybody can come to those. That's not made clear if that's the way it is, because it, having forums before back to school or open house, and those kind of things are great for parents as well, they're conducive for parents. A survey that doesn't always let you give all the input you want, while they have their place, having more teachers involved where you're in the room to say, to give back and forth feedback, I think would be a good thing for us. And I know you answer every question I have, because I know that we meet quite often, but I think as our general community, might be better to think, is there another way next year? Because I know we're too late in the process this year, but next year, is there a way to incorporate more teacher voice? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the input.
Young lady at the far end.
Please.
Hello, my name is Mrs. Quintana Antonio. I've been teaching here for a long time. So Ms. Ventura, you have this, I know, because I know you're new to the district, and I know in the past we've had done this, because I myself had 3 children at different sites at one time and tried to attend this meeting, LCAP meetings and school site council meetings as a parent. I know a while back then, and I know we had issues now that I work with my team and setting up these meetings for LCAP. Is there gonna be a master calendar where all school sites kinda, hey, this is the day I'm meeting with my, my school, because I know this past year, that's had, the past couple years been an issue that we're having, oh, Hester, Freedom are having the same meeting at the same time, because we have had a lot of parents come in with their school site meeting saying, hey, sorry, I can't make it because I have this over here at the same time. And so I know as a parent, then, I say then now because I just had my last one to grade this So just keeping consistent, is that something that's in plan for this school year? A master calendar where all our administrators, can input the dates if they're gonna have the school site or LCAP meetings for their own sites?
Yes.
And then, okay, cause that would be something, instructed to go back, cause it was successful then. Then my other question would be also going back to the funding of PD, professional development. I think I, as an academic coach, working with my teachers on my campus, I think one of the great issues that teachers always bring, yes, we go to these PDs, but we don't have time to kind of sit down and reflect and think and give us time for planning to do that. Is that something that the funding will provide teachers when they do the PD, and that extra funding for the LCAP will give them the ability to kind of sit down and think about it and how to implement that better for the construction, initial care construction, because that is very critical, that's very important. But we do need our, and I'm just talking as an academic coach, and the concerns that teachers have brought to me. Yes, I learn a lot of things, but then we're back in the classroom, there's things I could do right away, but I wish I had more time to kind of sit a day, sink all that in, and how can we lesson plan together and make that possible? So that was something that we,
Yeah.
get that extra day for our teachers to be able to be successful in the classroom when they come in with that training.
So the professional development, regardless of the source, it could be LCAP, it could be a different funding source. If the nature of the work is to receive and implement training, you can usually utilize that training, that funding source to do that, whether it's carving out some time during the day, meeting after work on a timesheet or some sort. If that's directed by the leadership, it can be doable, but there needs to be a plan in place to do that, because funds do get used pretty quickly if it's not planned out.
And I think it's very successful just because I work with the migrant program. Migrant program teaches us first, we go to training, give us time to plan, and then we start teaching. And I think that's a very nice system that you kind of need to set up here in our district.
Thank you. One more question? If not, Mr. Ochoa, thank you so very much for that presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
At this time, we close that part of it at 8:17.
Good job.
We move on to 12.2, approval of solution tree proposal for in-person professional development.
Motion and a question.
Second.
Yeah, I have questions too.
We have a motion on the floor by Ms. Lopez, second by Mr. Alvarez, and we do have a couple questions on the floor by the board members. Ms. Lopez, go ahead.
Yes, it does say, in-person training, but then it says something about force majeure services could be delivered on scheduled dates virtually. Can we make sure if there is a force majeure with whatever that may be, that they rescheduled and make sure that it's in person?
Yeah, absolutely. The contract with this.
Can you stand up, sir?
That's part of the standard contract, but all of our in-services, all of professional development will be in person.
Okay, so if it's part of our contract, we need to make sure that, we cross that out. No virtual.
It's a standard contract the Solution Tree has,
Cross it out.
but everything will be in person.
Thank you.
Ms. Gomez?
Yeah, okay, so I have several questions. This right here is professional development. It's curriculum, but can you explain it, elaborate on what this is gonna be doing or providing for our teachers and our staff?
Yes, so the last couple of years, we've been focusing on professional learning communities. So PLCs is the one, form of professional development that you can gain up to 4 years of lost learning in 1 year if it's performed correctly. And so, last year we sent our principals and academic coaches to our campus training, which was led by 2 of the very best professional learning community, professional development presenters.
I did read that they're good at presenting, because I did some research on them. Does this, so I do see in the contract it says for 130 participants, does that include DCA? Is DCA a part of this, or are they?
Yes, all sites will be a part of professional learning.
So you said that this is for over a 4-year,
So,
or the learning, or the 4 years done in 1 year? Because our students are behind, right?
yes, we have students that are arriving at the high school level with 6th and 7th grade
Mm-hmm.
learning capacity.
Yes.
And so we
That's a
recognize
fact.
as a professional learning community, we can build up to 4 years of learning.
In 1 year, without intervention?
Performed and done correctly.
Okay. My other question, will the consultants be available on an ongoing basis? Should we have any, or,
As far as consistency, yes, so Joseph Vianora, the gentleman that handled our area, presented, in January
Mhm.
this last year. So the same gentleman, along with potentially Luis Cruz and Cindy Pilar, will be supporting us.
okay, and so we've already sent our site, principals out for training, and this is just a different piece of the, PLC.
It's basically bringing it back to our campuses.
Mhm.
And then not just the addition of our principals and academic coaches, but now our teachers.
Okay.
And also I wanted to add that intervention is a big component of PLCs. It's called RTI, Response to Intervention. So
Yeah.
when teachers meet in their professional learning communities, they identify students who have not mastered a particular standard or a particular
Mhm.
skill. And they set up a day where they do a rotational piece, where at level, the kids being leveled out, each of the teachers will address whatever the skill that needs to be retaught with the students during the school day.
Okay.
I do wanna, make it a point that none of it is from the general fund. We do have educator effectiveness block grants
Yeah.
specifically designed for professional development.
Yeah, we have to spend money on professional development. I just wanna make sure that it's geared in the right,
I wanna make it
it's
clear,
worth.
and this is a Mexico made a fantastic
Yes.
statement earlier on about us training our teams, and specifically on sites. Certain sites we're focusing on specific needs off of survey data. This is all data-driven professional development. We recognize where our students are at. We also wanna highlight some of the sites that are already doing this professional learning community work. They brought back all of the professional development that you as a board agreed to.
Mhm.
And so they're already integrating it. What we wanna do now is include our teachers, most of our teachers, well, all of our teachers, but most of our teachers to start practicing that work.
Okay.
Clear?
Thank you.
Any other question, board members?
Nope.
If not, we do have a motion on the floor, by Ms. Lopez, and a second. Did I hear somebody say, didn't he have a question? Or am I hearing things?
No.
Oh, I think we heard a sneeze.
I think I'm hearing things, I'm sorry. We do have a motion on the floor by Ms. Lopez, second by Mr. Alvarez, is that correct?
Yes.
That being said, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, that carries 5-0. 13.1, approval of certificated personnel, item 13.1.1 through item 13.1.2.
Motion.
Motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
Me.
We have a motion on the floor by Mr. Alvarez, second by Ms. Lopez, is that correct?
Yes.
Board members have any questions?
Yep.
If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, it carries 5-0. 13.2, approval of classified personnel, item 13.2.1 through item 13.2.4.
Move.
We have a motion on the floor.
Second.
We have a motion on the floor by Ms. Lopez, second by Mr. Alvarez, is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
That being said, board members have any questions? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, that carries 5-0. 13.3, approval of summer school secondary other personnel, item 13.3.1 through item 13.3.4.
Move.
We have a motion on the floor.
Second.
We have a motion on the floor by Ms. Lopez, second by Ms. Gomez, is that correct?
Yes.
That being said, board members have any question?
Yep.
If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, That carries 5-0. 13.4, approval of extracurriculum activity, coaching personnel, item 13.4.1 through item 13.4.7.
Motion.
We have a motion on the floor.
Second.
We have a motion on the floor by Mr. Alvarez, second by Ms. Lopez. Is that correct?
Yes.
That being said, board members have any questions?
Nope.
If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That carries 5-0. We move to 13.5, personnel action reports, information only. Board members, do you have any questions on that? If not, we go to 13.6, approval of agency agreement between Tulare County Office of Education and Farmersville Unified.
Move.
We have a motion on the floor.
Second.
Coin toss, who says second?
Ruben.
Ruben, okay. Ruben won the coin toss, good enough. We have a motion on the floor by Ms. Lopez, second by Mr. Macareno, is that correct?
Yes.
That being said, board members have any questions? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, that carries 5-0. 13.7, 13.8, 13.9 have been tabled to next board meeting. We go to 14.0, board business. 14.1, approval to attend CSBA conference on December 5 through the 7th, 2024 in Anaheim.
Move.
Move, Mr. Macareno. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion on the floor by Mr. Macareno, second by Ms. Lopez, is that correct?
Yes.
And that's for those board members that can attend. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, that carries 5-0. We go to 14.2, consideration of any item any member of the board wishes to have in the future agenda to, or provided written update. Mr. Alvarez?
I know it's been a tough time, but if we can get a kind of an update on WASC and how we're moving in that direction, and we'll be on time for the new year, that would be great.
Anything on Mr. Alvarez?
No, that's it for now.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Gomez?
Yes, can we get an update on where we at with the STRS? We're in June now, right? So has the, TCOE completed? Last board meeting, I requested an update on the GO bond. So I'm requesting an update on where we are with that. Has the committee met? How do we move forward? What do we do? Can I receive a written update on why, our counselors are being moved around?
Okay. Anything else, Pam?
And, may we, at the end of this next, at the end of this month, have an update on where we are with, our projects for maintenance and stuff? Are we up on board? I mean, are we on schedule, on time? Are there any delays? Is there anything that's holding them back from getting stuff done?
Anything else, Ms.
That's
Gomez?
it for me.
Are you sure, Ms. Gomez?
I'll bring more.
Thank you. Mr. Macareno?
With all the talk of lack of uniform protocols, consistency, et cetera, I think we need to address, being in compliance here as a board as well. I don't have a crystal ball, but we do have 2 elections coming up. And we're, as far as my understanding, we're not in compliance with our own board policy in terms of when we did reorganization. And per your guidance, you had said that legal counsel said that we need to bring it into open meeting. So I would like to bring that to the next meeting and discuss reorganization, if it's something that we should do to be in compliance, or leave as is.
Okay. Anything else, sir?
That should do it.
Okay. Ms. Lopez?
Ms. Gomez had a couple of things already that I was going to ask about. A written update, I know, as far as the counselors, if it can also be explained to the counselors themselves, the reasoning for wanting to move them. I think it's if they haven't already met with them, that they should meet with them and have an open discussion. So I'd like to be included, of course, in that written update. I know with the GEO bond, I think part of the thing that I had requested is that maybe we start with the roofs, because I know that a lot of the roofs were leaking, so we need to get something on the agenda. I mean, the bond committee can't meet until we actually have some money expended from the GEO bond, and
There we go.
one of the things that is covered under that is repairs.
Yeah, I could have Tony give a presentation on where are we with the different projects, and that would lead into the GEO bond.
And yes, and part of the project's update, I know that a lot of the wiring had to be redone in order to get our fire alarm system back up after one of the panels failed that had been installed or caught fire, which is not good. So that's one of the things that also we've been waiting for in quite a while. So yes, I agree.
Anything else?
No.
Good. I have nothing at this time. Thank you. Thank you, board members, for your input. We move on to 15.0, business services. 15.1 was tabled, so we move on to 15.2, public hearing 2024-2025, budget 831, open. Jason, you have the floor.
Well, here we go. I would like to start off by thanking the board for allowing me to give these presentations. I think they're extremely helpful for the board and also the community to see what's happening financially. And this applies to every report that we do, the first, second, interims, as well as the unaudited actuals and the budget. And so tonight we'll be doing an overview of the 24-25 budget. I think it's always helpful to go over some of the major assumptions that we've included in this budget. For starters, at the beginning of every financial report, first, second, interim budget like we have here, the county always issues a letter, and in those letters they have recommendations for all Tulare County districts to follow. So I have here as my first bullet our TCOE planning factors, and so these are the factors that we're following, and I would pretty much guarantee that all districts in Tulare County are following as well. So I realize it's pretty small, but maybe you can see it on the screen there. So the first thing we're looking at is the COLA. You'll see that in 24-25. Now, with the May revised, the COLA is estimated at 1.07% for 24-25. For 25-26, we're looking at 2.93%, and 26-27, we're looking at 3.08%. Now, just for a sense of comparison, you may remember back at second interim when we did that, I think it was at the end of February. At that point, 24-25 COLA was estimated at 0.76%. So between February and they may revise just those few short months, one of the assumptions we've been using and all other districts in California have been using has changed. At second interim, it was 0.76%. Now with the May revise, we're looking at 1.07%. So that's, I just wanted to highlight, that's one of the main variables that's changed between now and second interim. We also have some STRS rates there. STRS is staying constant for the next 3 years. And then we also have the PERS rates, and those are increasing slightly. So we've factored those slight increases into our multi-year projections. Next bullet is one-time funding. You've probably heard me talk about the one-time funding with ESSERS, ESSERS 1, 2, and 3. For all intensive purposes, we will basically exhaust that funding by June 30th. However, we do have more one-time funding, which I have here. We have what's called the Arts and Music Instructional Materials Block Grant, and our allocation for that is about this $1.4 million figure you see here on the board. In addition, we have a Learning Recovery Block Grant, and the allocation for that is about $4.3 million. Now, I want to highlight that these are one-time funds once again. They are restricted funds, so basically they have strings attached to them. We can only spend them in certain ways to remain compliant with the state. And as was brought up recently, and we've been dealing with for the past year at least, is the high school fire alarm. Just recently, I was talking with our MOTF director, asking him, what do you estimate the cost will be for the fire alarm replacement or repair at the high school? We realize that's very important. He did some calls and estimated about $400,000. So I've included that in next year's budget as well. The reason I have it here is because that's going to be a cost to the unrestricted general fund, as the board and the community is aware. We have several other projects, but most all of them are funded with other restricted funds. Like some of them are, for example, we have the TKK Hester Modular Project. That's being funded with one-time funds that we're getting from the state, and I believe that there's an agreement, a couple agenda items back that addresses that. So that's funding specific to that project. In addition, we have the ongoing chiller project over here at the high school. We are using ESSERS 2 for that. We received an extension from the state and federal government to basically spend those funds until 2025. So we got an extension on that, so we can finish that project up and use those one-time funds for one-time expenses. So those are just a couple of the big ones that I want to bring to the board's attention that are being funded with specific one-time funds that are allocated for that specific purpose. So next we have here is an actual snapshot of our May revised LCFF revenue calculations. And so I have, the first column is 23-24, and it goes all the way out to 26-27. But I guess I'll start with 24-25. If you look there, in the bold where it says total funding sources, we're projected to get about $36.7 million next year in total LCFF funding. Now, in comparison, I wanted to share what we're projected to receive in 23-24. So this year, we're projected to receive about 37.3. So this year, we're projected about 37.3 million. However, next year, we're projected to receive less. We're projected to receive about $36.7 million. So if this holds true, then next year we're going to get about $600,000 less than we're getting this year. Now, I'm sure we're asking, what's causing this? Why are we getting less funding? And the main reason is because of declining enrollment. Declining enrollment leads to declining ADA. School districts are funded on the higher of the current year's ADA, the prior year's ADA, or a 3-year rolling average. And this 3-year rolling average ADA just came into effect basically 2 years ago. And we're falling into that third bucket. So we're being funded on our third year rolling ADA average. And so what that means is that since we're in declining enrollment for the past 3 years, our ADA is decreasing a little bit each year. And if we continue decreasing enrollment, our revenue will continue to decrease if there's a minimal COLA increase. And for example, in 24-25, there's basically 1%, 1.07% COLA, but our ADA is still decreasing. And so that's the reason that we're projected to receive less next year than this year. Once again, it's because of decreasing enrollment, which leads to decreasing ADA. And as we've gone over a couple times, public school districts for the most part are funded on ADA. So if students don't come to school, then the school doesn't get credit for that student for that day. So basically that's what's driving this difference between this year and next year. Then if you look at the third column out, 25-26, it starts to ramp up again, in large part because the COLA is increasing in that 25-26 year. So we're projecting 37.2 million in 25-26, and in 26-27, 38.3. So next year, it's likely that we're going to see a dip in our LCF funding, unless our enrollment, hence ADA, increases. So here we have the general fund summary. Now, as I've mentioned before, the general fund is composed of 2 distinct parts. The first part in the left-hand column there is what we call unrestricted. And in the middle column there, those are where we track all of our restricted resources. For example, Title I, Title II, Title III, ACES, assets, ESSERS, arts and music, learning recovery. Those are all restricted resources. So those are all represented in that middle column right there. And the third column is combined. So that's just adding the unrestricted and restricted together. And so in total, what we're looking at here is the general fund for next year. So you'll see there, our LCF revenue is projected at 36.7 million, which is basically the same figure that we have on this prior slide. Then we have some other state revenue, other local total revenue. So the total revenue on the unrestricted side, we're projecting at about 37.9 million. And then we have various expense categories, which we're totaling about 39.4 million. And then that next line down, it says other financing sources uses. So that is actually a contribution. So that is money going from the unrestricted side of the budget to the restricted side of the budget. And so that's the reason that you'll see that $2.7 million figure there. It is the same. So on the unrestricted side, $2.7 million is going out. And on the restricted side, $2.7 million is coming in. And basically what that is those are for programs that either don't receive any funding or don't receive enough to basically be self-sustaining. For example, the big pieces that are in this 2.7 million are maintenance. Believe it or not, we really don't receive any funding for maintenance, but we are required to basically have at least a certain set aside for that. So what happens is we have to contribute from the unrestricted side to the restricted to fund maintenance, and that is a worthy cause, 100% worthy cause. Another contribution is basically special ed. Special ed, unfortunately, does not receive the funding it needs to sustain itself. And so what routinely happens, and this has been happening for several years, and it's commonplace, unfortunately, up and down the state, is that school districts have to contribute to the special ed costs. And so like an example is, let's say for our state special ed, we get 600,000, but the cost to run the program is $1 million. So 600,000 is paid for by the state because we get 600,000 for state special ed, but that 400,000 is a contribution from the unrestricted general fund. So we have to contribute 400,000 to special ed so they can run the program because it has to be balanced. The revenues and expenses have to equal. They have to be the same. So basically that's what that represents right there. So just going down at the very bottom of the unrestricted column, if we spend every dollar that we're projected to spend, we'll be looking at a decrease of about 4.2 million. Now just going over to the restricted, which is in the middle. Now once again, those represent specific programs that have specific strings tied to them and only can be spent in certain ways. And in total there, for total revenue, we're projecting about 9.7 in restricted. Total expenditures is about 16 million on the restricted. And then once again, we have the other financing uses. Once again, that's the money coming in from the restricted side, and that's coming over into the unrestricted to the restricted. And we're looking like the decrease there, if we spend every dollar that's budgeted, that would be a decrease of about $3.5 million. So now I bet some people are asking, what's this? How is it possible that we're projecting 9.7 million in revenue, but our total expenditures are about 16? So in large part, that's due to one-time funding sources. There are various causes, but the main ones I would say are, once again, we're going back to one-time funding. So we have budgeted and we have people in arts and music. That's a one-time funding source that we've received all that money. So that $1.4 million is sitting in fund balance. We're not getting any more money, but yet we are using that money next year for materials and supplies and personnel. And the same thing for Learning and Recovery Block Grant. That is one-time funds. We have received the $4.3 million. We received that $4.3 million already, but nonetheless we have a considerable number of positions in that we're spending down. So, at some point those funds will run out, but basically that's why we're seeing such a difference between the revenue and the expenditures, is that we have, we're basically spending a lot of the one-time funds that we received, namely those two big ones that I just shared with the board, which basically is what we should do. You know, we got that money for the purpose to spend it to, you know, for the students' education, and so that's what we're doing. But I just wanted to highlight to the board because, you know, to me that jumps out as to why is there such a big difference there? And in large part, there are other smaller reasons, but those are the two main big ones. We have one-time funding that we have personnel in and other expenses, and that's why we're seeing that large expenditure line right there. So going down, if we spend every dollar that we're budgeting, we're looking at the restricted side, we decrease about 3.5. And then the third column over is both columns combined. So in total, for the entire general fund, we're projecting about 47.7 million in total revenues. Expenditures about 55.5. And if we spend every dollar we have budgeted, we're projecting a net decrease of about 7.8 million. Now, once again, just jumping back to the restricted, as long as we watch that and we make sure that when those one-time funds begin to expire, we should be fine. But as long as we have to be vigilant and watch it so we can take the necessary action when we get to that point. But on both those resources, we still have a couple years before they sunset. So here is the multi-year projection, which is basically kind of a 50,000-foot view of what the general fund looks like 3 years out. And my standard caveat when we do these is these are projections into the future. Unfortunately, you know, nobody has a crystal ball. Nobody knows exactly what's going to happen. So we basically, what we do is we follow the county's recommendations and the planning factors. So we factor in the COLA that they recommend. You know, we use our one-time funding and we watch those sunset dates to be sure that, you know, we're not spending money when we're past the deadline. And we use all those assumptions and the best information we have, and we generate this. So in the first column here, that's the beginning of next year, so that's 7/1/24. And in total, for the beginning balance, we're looking at about 19.5 million. Now I want everybody to realize that that's actually combining the fund balance of the the unrestricted and the restricted. So it's combining both. So that 19.5 is the entire general fund balance. And then we have our revenues and expenditures, and the net change is that $7.8 million, which we just kind of went over on the previous slide. And so if we spend every dollar that we're budgeting for next year, our fund balance at 6/30 would be around 11.7 million, but still like 12.2% reserve. So the way it works from here is that ending balance at 24-25 becomes the beginning balance for the next fiscal year. And then we have our revenues and expenditures as well. And the net change there is about $4.3 million. And we're looking at a fund balance of about 7.4. Still in that second year out, our reserve is still above 3%, 9.16 projected. And it's the same process. That 7.4 becomes the beginning balance for the third year out for 26-27. And we have our revenues and expenditures. We have a similar net change of about 4 million, which brings the ending fund balance down to about 3.4. Until the third year out, we're looking at about 5.92%. Now, I've also, you know, I've done a couple of these. So another standard, you know, caveat is that, like I was saying with the general fund, generally in my experience, we don't spend every dollar that's budgeted. So in this 3-year projection, some of these variables will change over time, which will mean that some of the revenues will change, and likely some of the expenditures will change. So this 3-year projection will change over time depending on ADA and depending on COLAs and whatever happens with the California economy. But at this point, we're using our best information to project revenues out and to project expenditures out. And this last slide here is what we call SB 858, which stands for Senate Bill 858. We've been doing this for a few years. It was a bill that was passed that requires all public school districts to disclose their next year's projected ending fund balance and then go over how that ending fund balance could be used. So it's really small here, but the way this works is that you'll see it starts with the general fund, Fund 01. So that $6.7 million figure you see there, that is the projected ending fund balance just on the unrestricted side of the budget. So we're talking just on the unrestricted side at 630.25. If we spend every dollar we have budgeted, our ending fund balance on the unrestricted side would look like about $6.7 million. Now, on the unrestricted side is where we keep our 3% reserve. For a district our size, we're required to keep at least 3% in the third year out. That's a state regulation. So if you'll go a couple lines down, you'll see 6.7 to 3%. So for us, the 3% reserve for next year is looking about 1.6 million. So the way this form works is it takes our entire 630 ending fund balance of 6.7, and it says, okay, we're going to back out, we're going to deduct your 3% reserve, which is about that 1.6, and so we're left with this 5.1 million. And then what we have to do is we have to identify potential uses for that remaining 5.1. And so here I've identified, I think, 5 or 6 potential uses for that 5.1. One is HVAC replacements for $1 million. As we know, those are getting more and more expensive as the years goes on, so that may not even be enough. The next item would be cash flow and credit rating. Every time we do a COP or a GO bond, that's one of the variables that they assess, and so it's important to have a sufficient fund balance, because that's one of the things that they look at. Next is facility improvements / deferred maintenance. We have $1 million for that. As we know, facility improvements are extremely expensive, and deferred maintenance as well. So, if that's only $1 million, and that could honestly go pretty quick with a couple of modulars. Bus replacement vehicles. So we have 500,000 there. At some point, some of the equipment is going to have to be replaced. Some of the tractors may have to be replaced or buy new ones, because eventually all equipment wears out. Same thing for buses. At some point, we're going to have to get another bus or another couple buses, and those aren't relatively inexpensive. I think a new bus, last couple we bought have been a little bit north of 200,000. Yeah, so school buses are expensive. And the last item I have there is just safety, and I have about 631,000. I know that there's some safety improvements that the district has been looking at for cameras, doing other things to the actual facilities so they're more easily identified by the authorities, should that ever be needed. So I've indicated that some of this money could be used for that. Now, just because I've indicated what this money could be used for doesn't mean that the board is stuck with these identified items here. The board could easily change these. You're not stuck with them at all, but nonetheless, we're required to go through and identify reasons as to why we could use this $5.1 million. And so once we go through all this and we subtract out that, the remaining unsubstantiated balance would be 0. And this is one of the documents that we have to turn into the county office after the board approves our budget. We have to prove that we did this SB 858 disclosure, and we have to turn this in as well. So this is one of the required documents that we submit to TCOE with our 24-25 budget. So with that, I would like to ask the board if you had any questions.
Yeah, what has the increase been for the last year for our child, capital per child? The funding that we get per child, and I know our AD keeps dropping off, but it seems like they passed something and raised it. It used to be 12 or 13. It's like 16,000.
Yeah, I think if we're just talking LCF.
Can you repeat what the question was? Jason,
The-
did you hear it?
Yeah, the funding for each child, we get so much money per child that we have in our district. So like we're building a new pre-K, right? We're building some new classrooms, trying to bring more kids in. We have new projects being done. So they've raised that. They raised it like every couple of years. And it used to be 12 something. Now it's like 16,000 per child, right? What it is exactly? Do you know what it is?
I don't have that exact number.
Yeah.
I can put it in and share it with the board for the next meeting. But yes, I want to see you mentioned about 16,000. And that's generally like the ballpark we use for this year.
Right.
Years ago when LCFS started, it did start low. And if you recall, as each year went, we got more money and more money. And that probably went on for 7 years or so
Yeah.
until the LCFF was fully funded. And it was fully funded, I think, probably maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And then now it's just kind of, sustaining itself. But for this year, yeah, it's about, for just strictly LCFF, it's about 16,000. But I will make a note and put something in the board for the next meeting so the board can see what that actual dollar figure is.
I think I would like to see a projection too on our new projects that we're building, new classrooms, things like that. We have an increase in ADA. I think I would like to see that. Anyway, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
My turn. I'll try not to be long. For these one-time fundings, I know that you said that there was like some personnel positions. And maybe I missed it, our UPK coordinator, is that salary in any of those one-time fundings?
We do have a one-time UPK funding. It's not in here.
Okay.
That's, the UPK position is being funded out of that resource.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Here I was just kind of highlighting some of the 7-figure ones we had, just so the board was aware.
Okay, and then for this new learning recovery block grant, that's brand new for us, right? So we haven't really determined what we're gonna use it on?
I don't believe this plan, this funding source requires a plan, but we have sat in meetings, district, and the intent of these funds, according to my recollection, is that it's supposed to basically be used for, to deal with learning loss, and so that's why it's learning recovery. Basically, it's kind of like another way of dealing with the learning loss that the students suffered during the pandemic.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Mr. Macarino?
Nothing for me.
Ms. Lopez?
Yes, on any of our projects, do we have matching fund requirements on any of them?
We do.
Is that included in that?
So the matching fund, so yes, great question. So our TKK, and I believe it's a couple items later here on the agenda tonight, that project does have a matching requirement. Our match for that project is in the realm of 700,000, but I'll get the exact number for the board and put it into the next agenda. But that is not in here because we were planning, so what we've kind of dealt with here is the general fund. So the board has set aside other funds in 401, which is, you may recall a couple years ago, we set aside $2 million. And so that's gonna go help with paving the new solar facility over adjacent to Snowden. And there's also funds in, if the board may recall, a couple years ago, we got about $1.6 million returned to us because of the CTE building. So that money went into 350, and working with the county, I think they moved it to 403, but I'll get the exact funds for you. And so the district's plan was to use either one of those resources to fund the match that Mrs. Lopez is talking about. So, I mean, my plan, but I was gonna share with the board, would be not to use the general fund for that $700,000 match, but use, some of the facility funds that the board set aside for that purpose.
Okay, and could you tell us 1 month expenditures total would be how much? Would we cover it with 3%
Oh, no.
reserve?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know off the top of my head. That's a 100%, yes. Just salaries and benefits. I think the last payroll I signed was salary and benefits for everybody in the district. I think it was close to $3 million.
1 month.
Yeah, for 1 month.
1 month.
For 1 month. And that's just salaries and benefits. Once we factor in all the warrants that the board sees, in the consent earlier in the agenda,
Supplies and everything
then,
else?
then we're talking more.
Okay. And I just want to make sure, we do get ADA for TKK?
For TK, yes.
Yes.
Not for precinct.
TK.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jason, 2 questions. On our budget for the 24-25, has that already been included, the salaries that we're gonna be paying out?
Yes.
on the budget that you just gave us?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
the salaries are included there.
Okay. Second question, how is ADA calculated? Is it an average that they get? Do we get an increase or a decrease according to the attendance?
Yeah, so ADA, so enrollment is basically, how many students are actually on the roster, on the books per se. So, for example, just to keep it simple, let's just say that there's 100 kids that are going to school. So they're enrolled, but they haven't come to school yet. And let's just say that for whatever reason, 50 of those 100 never come to school, but they're on the books. At the end of P1 or P2 or whatever that period is, since we had 100 kids on the books, but only 50 of them came to school, our ADA would be 50. So even though we have, enrollment may be high per se, that's one thing, but what really matters for the district as far as funding is concerned and their education as well is when they come to school. So even though a student is out sick, and that is a reasonable reason, unfortunately, the way the rules are written, the district still does not receive funding for when that student is at home sick.
That's why it's so important for every school site to guarantee average daily attendance to be high.
But even if they're making up that time with Saturday school, does that even?
Well, okay, yeah, so that's a different, so just in general, if they don't come to school but they're on the roster, that's what determines ADAs actually when they come. Can some of those absences be made up through Saturday school? Yes.
And to go along with that question about what I asked earlier, if we have a decrease of enrollment this year, starting next year, the funding that is provided for ADA, does it decrease?
Yes, if our funding, or excuse me, if our enrollment decreases, in all likelihood, our ADA will decrease. So the result of that would be, yes, our funding would decrease.
So example, if we're getting 16,000 per child,
Mhm.
the following year could be only 14,000.
Yes.
That correct? Okay. I
Now,
just wanna
the
clarify.
tough part about those scenarios is that, in large part too, it depends on what is happening with the COLA.
Okay.
So if the COLA increases and surpasses the loss of ADA, then it's kind of a wash. But what we're seeing in next year in 24-25, the COLA increase is essentially 1%, which for a district our size is not really that big. Step and column is like 1.5%. So 1% here doesn't even cover step and column for teachers.
So I guess the thing is that we have to keep our kids in school, being able to survive. All right, thank you, Jason, for that.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Pizza Mondays might work out.
There you go. Thank you so very much for that presentation,
Okay.
Jason. Excuse me.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll allow a few questions because we're running late. We gotta be out here by 10. Go ahead, ma'am.
I'll just be fast.
That's quick. Thank you. Next one, no, go ahead.
Drop in enrollment, because that's happening almost everywhere.
Mhm.
My question is, because I don't see it in this district, how we're tracking, I don't see the board being given a report every month that says, here's what here's our number of kids on the books, here's the number of kids that actually come to school, here's the number of kids who have left, and segregated by school site, so that I love the fact that I know at the school sites we're pushing, you gotta get to school, unless you get something so ill that you're gonna make us all sick, come. But are we tracking too to see, are there specific school sites where we're seeing numbers not hold true, and then, so that we can then address, okay, what's happening here? Just a comment?
No, that's a very good comment.
If I can address that, I think there were a couple board transmittals I did that actually had the enrollment by site. But we're only tracking enrollment at first because there's only 2 attendance periods. There's P1 and there's P2. And P2 is the really important one, not that P1's not, but P2 is important because we get paid off of P2. And so P2 hits about April 15th, ironically. So that's where that is. And as far as enrollment, enrollment's important because for unified districts like ourselves, we take our enrollment and we take 95% of that. That's generally our ADA. That's like a pretty good rule of thumb. for the past couple of years, we kind of dropped down a little bit, so maybe like we're 93, 94%. So once we get our enrollment, we can kind of, ballpark, within reason, our potential ADA based on that percentage.
Okay, thank you. I think the young lady with the red, then I'll get you next, sir. Can you please stand, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
Are there any monies allotted for the gate in the LCFF? We've got some bright kids. We want to challenge them. We want to motivate them. And I believe it's all funded through LCFF now. So are there any monies, just to challenge those students? Because we've got brilliant students in our district. And we need to motivate them and keep them and let them thrive.
I don't have the actual LCAP document in front of me here. I don't know if,
But it's my understanding that there are not going to be any more gate classes.
and maybe Mr. Ochoa can address this one. He's,
Other way.
So there are no separate funding sources for gate. It would have to come from an unrestricted source. So that would be a priority by the board, by the schools, to say we're gonna set aside these specific funds for gate.
So that would be something the board would need
It would have to be a funding priority.
thank you.
Go ahead, sir.
Attendance, do they count, if they show up for the day or like half the day, you mentioned it because I live across the street and during lunch, there's I know it's a closed campus, but there's a lot of kids that will do like a lot during lunch. So I'm pretty sure they probably don't come back. Would those numbers affect their
So maybe I could have, Mr. Billings, because since he's at the high school, he could address that?
I'm the assistant principal at the high school, and one of my job responsibilities is attendance. And I'd like to address two things. First of all, I could speak, I believe every site does this, but we track it every day, monthly, we do our updates. Our goal is always to be at a minimum of 95%. We go to extreme measures to do attendance recovery through Saturday school and other means to help those kids make up for their absences. The ed code requires 4 hours in order for ADA to be compliant. And so for our seniors, if they clock in for 4 periods, whether they're a late start or early release, as long as they get that 4 class period mark, then we get our ADA for the day.
Go ahead, ma'am.
I have a question. So you're talking about period 1, period 2 of the information of the ADA.
Okay.
Is that correct, the report and everything?
P1, P2, those are reporting periods of ADA. Mhm.
P1, P2, P2 is the last one that
Yes.
would count the end of the school year.
Well, we do have an annual, so there's P1, there's P2, and P2 is what we're paid off of for LCFF purposes. And there's an annual, which we'll be doing here anytime soon, just because the state wants to know if our ADA changed much between P2 and basically the end of school.
So what are the period times for P1 and P2?
I think P1 ends at the end of October, and P2 is like basically around April 15th, and the annual is due in a couple weeks. Yeah.
And so there's what's the percentage rate that students need to be in school coming every day? Because, you do have those chronic absentees, so what's the percentage rate to be considered to get the full EA?
Yeah, well, so, in a perfect world, it'd be great if, the enrollment was, 2,500 per se for us, and the ADA was 2,500. But in order for that to happen, every student that's enrolled would have to come to school every day. So,
100%, so you're basically saying 100%?
yes.
So we're talking about, because we do have living in our community, we do have our population where most of our students, during Christmas break, take off to Naples for 2 or whole month, or they take off during the spring break, so that's, so I was just wondering about that.
Sure, and,
We
Yes.
do have a plan moving forward with an independent study program that's gonna be addressing those migrant families that leave, so we don't lose the ADA. We wanna make sure that we keep the ADA at a minimum of 95%, and it becomes the responsibility of each of the sites to come up with alternative plans of making sure that Saturday school is in place. Remember, you can only recover ADA on a Saturday. You can't do it after school during the week, but the state of California has to be on a Saturday. So Saturday school, making sure the independent study, but even independent study is limited up to 20 days. So all of those things need to take place. But the number one thing that keeps kids in school, aside from the family issues, is the engagement at the school. So if the quality of instruction is high and the level of engagement is high, kids will wanna come to school a lot more than what they do, right? And we are gonna be working on a plan to eliminate that option of having kids leaving at noon. Because that gives a bad optics, and to top it all off, the kids are graduating not knowing how to read. That's an injustice for them to be leaving early. So we need to make sure that we address that moving forward.
I think with that, I was just thinking, because my son was a late starter for a senior, but then again, my son was one of those students that took a class at COS in the morning, so that's what he would do the late start. And I know most of the students that I know, along with his friends, also I think maybe there should be a criteria of who could maybe leave at 12 o'clock, give an early start, because there are some of our high school students that are doing dual enrollments and taking their courses at COS. And some of them are taking advantage of it because it is free. And I'm just talking about my own son and his friends that are doing that and did that for the senior thing. So I think, if we're gonna do that, we might consider the requirements, like who a senior could be if they're taking dual enrollment, because, we don't wanna take that away from those students that do want to take college courses in that.
Well, not only that, we wanna make sure that we have a strong articulation agreement with COS, where instead of sending our kids, they're either deputizing our teachers or sending teachers to the site, so that we still keep them at the site. Because you have to factor in safety. A lot of things can happen while kids are in transit.
Right.
So it's a complicated issue that we are definitely focused this summer to be working on for next year.
Any other questions?
Just note, Saturday school is only for junior high and high school level, correct? Or does it go?
No, it can go to elementary. Yeah.
Okay,
We've done it in the past at Freedom
Yeah.
a long time ago,
but it's not,
It just has to be on a Saturday.
Saturday.
Okay.
It's complicated, so it has its own requirements. You have to have a minimum of 15
Yeah.
students, otherwise you say bye-bye to the teacher. Because then you don't recover enough ADA to cover the salary of that teacher for that Saturday.
okay. And just a comment, I commend the teachers who do the Saturday school, and they are looking at the Children's Aries portal and seeing what assignments they're behind and forcing them to complete those assignments as well. That plays a role in getting kids caught up with their work, and getting that done. So for those teachers that are doing that on Saturday school, good job.
Any other questions? If not, we'll move on. We'll close this at 9:12.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Move on to 15.3, adoption of resolution 35-06-11-24 for the approval of education protection account EPA spending plan.
Motion?
Second?
We have a motion on the floor by Mr. Alvarez, second by Ms. Lopez. Is that correct?
Yes.
That being said, board members have any questions? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That carries 5-0. 15.4, approval of grant agreement for preschool program transitional kindergarten and full-day kindergarten.
Move.
We have a motion on the floor
Second.
and a second. We have a motion on the floor by Mrs. Lopez, second by Mr. Alvarez. Is that correct?
Yes.
That being said, board members have any question? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, that carries 5-0. We move on to 17.0, future meeting dates. 17-1, June 25th and July 16th. We move on to 19.0, policy and administration regulations. 19.1, second reading, approval for board policy series 3000, business and non-instructional.
Move.
We have a motion on the floor.
Second.
We have a motion on the floor by Ms. Lopez, second by Mr. Alvarez. Is that correct?
Yes.
Board members have any questions on that?
No.
If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, it carries 5-0. We go to 19.2, first reading of board policy, series 4000, personnel. There'll be known, board members, if you have that policy, go ahead and read it, and it'll be brought back next board meeting. Thank you. All right?
Yeah, I made a note, now I forgot what I meant by that.
Good enough. We go to 20.0, adjournment to closed session at 9:15. In closed session, we'll be discussing 20.1, Conference of Labor Negotiation, GC 5495, 7.6. It is the intent of the board to meet in closed session to review its position and instruct the designee rep, agency designate, Representative Dr. Chavez, Mr. Kraft, Mr. Mendez, name of organization, FTA, CSEA Management. 20.2, Public Employee Discipline, Dismissal, Release, Complaint, Governing Code 54957. 20.3, Public Employment Performance Evaluation, Superintendent. 20.4, Public Employee Employment Title Business Manager, CBO, Governing Code Section 54957. At this time, ladies and gentlemen, we're going into closed session. Feel free to stick around. We will be coming out in closed session at before 10 o'clock. But anyhow, feel free to stick around. Thank you.
Mr. Mendez and Delma for 20.4. Everybody else can go ahead and grab.
Where's the sandwiches?
21.0, action taken in closed session item. 21.1, conference with labor negotiation, GC 54957.6. Is the intention of the board to meet in closed session to review its position and instruct its designee rep, agency designate representative, Dr. Chavez, Mr. Kraft, Mr. Mendez, name of organization, FTA, CSEA, and management. No action taken. 21.2, public employee discipline, dismissal, release, complaint. No action taken. 21.3, public employee performance evaluation. Ladies and gentlemen, we're extending this due to time constraints. We will have a special board meeting. Mark this down for June 18th, starting at 6 o'clock. At that time, we'll continue the evaluation process. We then go to 21.4, public employment, employee employment, title, business manager, CBO, government code, section 54957, no action taken. And we go to 22.0, adjournment at 9:44.
Move.
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Lopez, second by Mr. Alvarez, is that correct?
Yes.
That being said, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, that carries 5-0. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for staying patiently with us, and we will continue again on June 18th.
Is there a problem? That's Tuesday.
That's on a Tuesday, Rosemary.
Do you have anything for me to sign? You good? Okay.
Alright.